in a series of 3 business. This is the second in a series of 3 in our Business Sense program with Comerica Bank. I'm Richard Palais. I'm the Senior Vice President of Small Business Lending or Community Lending at AMPAC Business Capital. Yeah, and just for a few moments, I want to share a little bit about AMPAC, and then we're going to turn the presentation over to our guests today, Comerica Bank. And we have joining us, there's David Betancourt, we have Chris Healy, and we have Winston Wilson. They will tell you more about themselves as we pass this presentation over to them to continue. So at AMPAC Business Capital, again, we thank you for joining us. We make access to business capital as easy as ABC. I like to say that ABC stands for Application, Business Review, and Closing. It's a fairly simple process, and we do it that way so that you understand how you can actually access capital in an environment when it seems like maybe you cannot. We are a 501c3 mission-based lender. We're authorized by both the U.S. Department of Treasury and the U.S. Small Business Administration to provide lending. And what that means is we have many programs in which we can serve you. And we partner with banking partners like Comerica Bank to assist when the bank cannot assist in making lending at that particular point in time. And we are here to help uplift communities, help make families stronger. And we want to help you as an entrepreneur recognize your entrepreneurial dreams. In our organization, we have partnerships like Comerica Bank, many other banks, and government organizations such as SCORE, the Small Business Administration, the Women's Business Center program, the Small Business Development Center program, and we're also, because we're located in Ontario, we have a relationship with Cal State San Bernardino, who can assist in providing business advising, training programs. We offer training programs. They do as well at our new corporate center in Ontario. And then finally, because we are a direct lender authorized to make these loans to you, we are here to serve, and then we can place you in partnership with banks like Comerica. Our objective in the lending that we do is helping you to get to a yes. We want to say yes when others have said no. And how do we do that? We do prudent underwriting with a heart, which means we want to hear your story. We want to understand how you've gotten to the place you are and where do you think your business can go. And if you have the capacity to repay a loan and a vision that says, yes, this can be possible, we're here to help. Our lending products run anywhere. Oh, I'll get to that in a moment. We finance small businesses at all stages of growth, whether you're a startup. And a startup being defined for us is you're literally just getting started. You opened the doors yesterday, right on through that you've been an existing business and you've been around for 3 or more years. We call you an existing business, and we can help you with working capital, right through to purchasing your commercial property, which we encourage all of you to do at some point during the journey of your small business career. This slide is actually changing. You notice it says AMPAC is a direct lender. I mentioned that earlier. That part is true, but the exciting part that we're excited to share with you today is the $150,000 that you see has now been moved to $250,000. We recently received our SBA Community Advantage designation. So it's a 7A loan as you would get at a traditional bank, but we have certain flexibilities as a nonprofit organization. This program is opened up just for us, not to compete with banks, to, as in this relationship, assist you with the programs that we have to offer that you cannot find at a traditional bank. And we're very excited about that. And finally, I wanted to showcase our new building. We hope that you would consider stopping by at some point, anytime after August 1st, by the way. That's when we'll actually occupy this building. It is currently under renovation. We are very proud to announce this building. Our president, Hilda Kennedy, has purchased this building for AMPAC. It's going to be the premier entrepreneurial ecosystem. This will be your one-stop shop as a small business. You'll be able to come in, meet us, meet our partners, and get all the assistance that you need in one place. I could go for hours talking about all the changes that are happening in this building just for you, but I would not be that rude to my guests. We're just very happy, and we look forward to seeing you. And please, on September 10th, if you'd mark your calendars, we are having our grand opening. So if you don't make it before September 10th, join us then. We'll be open all day and celebrating throughout the Inland Empire of our new opening. Thank you so very much for joining us on this morning. And at this time, I'm going to turn the further part of the presentation to David Betancourt and our guest from Comerica Bank.
thank you, Richard, and good morning to everybody for joining us today. So my name is David Betancourt. I'm the External Affairs Market Manager for Southern California. And first and foremost, I just want to thank Richard, Hilda Kennedy, and the whole team there at AMPAC, not only for being one of our strongest, CDFI investment partners, but also providing technical assistance, right? And so, today we're here celebrating our second session of our Juneteenth Recovery Bootcamp. And, here at Comerica, we're not only committed to supporting our community and our small businesses, but we're also committed to celebrating different cultures, different ethnicities, different communities. And so, Juneteenth is a huge milestone in our history, and I'm sure there was a lot of celebrations over the weekend. And, we thought, let's celebrate by providing more resources, more education for our small businesses as we're recovering. And so today on increasing your profits, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you do that? How do you implement some new best practices to collect your money, to collect those sales? So we brought in two of our Comerica Bank experts. We have our Senior Vice President, Chris Healy, and Vice President Winston A. Wilson with our Comerica Merchant Services team. And they're here today to provide, their expertise on how you can implement those best practices for your own business. So with that, I'll turn it over to both Chris and Winston.
Thank you very much, David. And thank you, Richard, for having us today. I could have listened to even more about AMPAC. That sounds very exciting. So great for that organization. So my name is Chris Healy. I am Senior Vice President of Merchant Services at Comerica Bank. Co-presenting with me is Winston Wilson. He is Comerica Bank's Executive Consultant to the United States Treasury's Card Acquiring Service. And just to make sure we're all in the right place, we are going to talk about merchant services today. And what that really means simply is it's that collection of financial products and services that's related to the enablement or acceptance of credit and debit cards. So it's as simple as that. We'll try to take away some of the mystery surrounding that business. And before we jump into it too much, we'll give a little bit of background about each other. So for me, my journey is probably reflective of something that all of you as entrepreneurs and business owners go through. And that's having a passion for growing a business from the ground up. And what does that mean? It seems a little weird because I actually started in a bank in the mid-90s at Imperial Bank, fresh out of grad school. But it was a very small division. I was the third employee. We were developing a healthcare product that combined healthcare transactions with financial transactions, most notably credit and debit card processing. And that's how I began learning about the industry. But more important, I grew that passion for what happens in a small business on a daily basis, the challenges you have, whether it's marketing, product development, service, compliance, or anything. And that has followed me throughout my career. So I did stay, and Imperial was later acquired by Comerica, and have been involved in payments the entire time. And in my current role, which I've had for about the last 8 or 9 years, I'm responsible for the merchant services program overall at Comerica Bank, which really means, again, enabling card acceptance on behalf of our clients. And they range from small businesses that are just starting out to more established ones and medium-sized ones, but even much larger ones and ones that might even have international processing needs or needs to process in foreign currencies. And card acceptance has become ubiquitous. It is something that we provide to educational institutions. We provide it to charities, churches. It is really in all facets of society. And one of the areas that it really grew into in the last decade is the government arena, supporting whether local municipalities, all the way up to state governments, and the largest of all. And I think with that, it's probably a good segue to hand off to Winston for him to share his background.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you, David and Richard, for really allowing us to be part of this. This has been so amazing to be part of you guys. And like Chris shared, I support our partnerships with the United States government, and we process credit cards and debit cards for any location you go into. So if you're going to get your passport, which will probably become a hot and heavy topic for many of us here in the near future. Or if you go into an embassy, or if you go into a military base, or you go to a museum or national park. When all of those transactions happen, Comerica Bank and our capability and our partners that we have all across the spectrum allows that to happen. And I'm so excited to be part of that. And I've been part of that since its inception. And that leverages my career. My career has been with merchant processing, similar to Chris, all throughout time. I can't remember what I did before merchant processing, let's put it that way. I was part of one of the largest processes that exist in the United States for many years. And in that role, I had the opportunity to work with sales, operations, training, and all of these different groups as far as really growing that business like Chris shared. And throughout that, the one thing that I remembered, and I used to always tell my team that's so key about that, is that we have to make sure that we're there for the business first, and we're understanding what they're going through first, as opposed to whatever great product or solution that we had. And so that has spanned the gamut of my entire career. Chris didn't share the time he's been with that, but you probably could guess that he and I put together, there's lots of decades as far as being understanding merchant services and how it works and how it can help you. I know at some point throughout this conversation, David and Richard, that we'll have an opportunity to engage and interact with some of our participants. So if you have questions, I believe that there's a way for you to do it via the chat or via another mechanism to make sure that we can do that and we can share that with you. So I'm so thrilled to be part of this. I hope you guys take some great nuggets from this, at least hear one or two things that we've got today. And so that's my intro for today. So I will turn it back over to Chris.
Thanks, Winston, for sharing that. And what you're going to hear a lot about today is technology and the importance of technology in how you operate your businesses, and more specifically, how you handle receivables in your business. And a great way to illustrate how technology remains important or is increasingly important in how we operate our businesses. Let's look at a completely different industry than payments. Let's just look at how we listen to music. If we think of technology, for over 100 years, there was really just one technology to listen to music, and that was the record player. It might have changed shapes and sizes, but basically it was the only technology you could use, and it wasn't portable. You could only use it in your home or office, wherever that record player was, and that was it. And then, in around the 70s, you had the technology evolve with magnetic tape. And there was different versions, 8-tracks and cassettes and so forth. And that changed the consumer experience to allow them to make music more portable. It was in their cars. They could carry it with them, take it to the beach as we enter the summer season, whatever that might be. And that technology was the predominant use for listening to music for about 30 years. And then looking at this slide, you can see the mobile phone on the far right. And that really represents the migration to digital for listening to music. And that has increasingly gone through faster and faster cycles of advancement, from CDs to then MP3 players to now, just really the last few years, being able to listen to music, literally millions of titles on demand, anytime, any place. And if you think about the implications for that, for companies involved in that industry, they are tremendous. The consumer expectations are entirely different today than they were just 10 years ago. So moving on to payments, the same thing has happened in technology. And Winston, you can advance that slide. So first, from the consumer side, cards first got into consumers' hands with ATMs, right? It was a way to bypass the teller line or access cash on a weekend. Over time, banks got together and regional partnerships were created to give more value to those cards. And then you had the large brands created, the Visas and the MasterCards, that ended up becoming international brands. And so today we're in a world where a consumer can board a plane at Los Angeles International without a penny in their pocket. And they can fly across the world and land at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. And as long as they have a card in their hand, they can get access to euros in a matter of seconds. And that, again, has unbelievable ramifications for businesses, because consumer behaviors and expectations have changed. Like they did listening to music, they are when it comes to dealing with money. A perfect example of that is people traveled with traveler's checks years ago. No more. So on the merchant side, we can see the same evolution, right? As a business owner. At first, it was, okay, we're accommodating this plastic that is starting to weave its way into society. And so many business owners in your feet, 50 years ago, had what Winston and I would call a knuckle buster. That's the device on the left. It might have sat underneath the counter, but it was to take an imprint of a card on carbon paper to accept a credit card transaction. It wasn't super convenient for business owners. They would have to take those receipts, they would have to, gather them up, take them to their bank at the end of the day, then the bank would have to process them. So there was a delay in getting payments. Like listening to music involved, or the technology's there, it did in payments, and you started getting into kind of crude computing machines reflected by this early point of sale terminal on the middle of the slide. Like early computers, they were very expensive and had limited functionality, but it did provide a couple benefits. One, it allowed businesses to get real-time authorizations for transactions, reducing some risk there. And the settlement happened automatically and electronically. So they didn't have to drive those receipts to the bank for deposit. The processing would be initiated automatically and the funds would be delivered quickly. So it was creating more convenience to business owners as consumer behavior was changing, faster, more efficient, and so forth. And as we move to today, on the far right of the screen, you see the images of a mobile phone and even a digital watch. And that really reflects the infinite amount of possibilities that exist in digital transactions, which is where we're moving faster and faster. An easy way to describe it now is we're in a world now where a 12-year-old can be wearing one of these watches and really have no concept of money and how much things cost in spending and counting change, and wave their wrist in front of a device on a counter in a coffee shop to get a smoothie. And that would use NFC, near field communication technology, to process that payment. And again, these changes in technology have tremendous implications for you all as business owners and entrepreneurs. And so to talk more about the trends we're seeing in payments and the technologies, I'm going to pass to my colleague, Winston.
Thanks, Chris. So you all are following us, the theme of technology. And as I share what we'll be talking about next, you'll hear another theme. So that'll be theme number 2, and that'll be around speed. And so if you think about the trends, and this data you see in front of you is produced by the Straw Hacker Group, one of the premier payments processing consulting groups, that shared what it looked like in 2010 as far as cash is concerned and how it looks like now. And keep in mind, that was 2020, early 2020. And so we've had some data, Chris and I have seen some articles recently that have shown that the usage of cash has an inverse. You ever heard of the hockey stick effect when it comes to business? It had the inverse hockey stick. So cash is going down precipitously and people aren't using it the same way they have before. And one thing I heard, and I thought this was very interesting, is that cash itself is starting to really become something that a lot of us use, but we don't think about the same way. So if you think about what Krista shared, and I'll talk about this even further, cash itself is a word that we use, but is it a thing that we have? It's been a long time since I can tell you I had $100 officially in my pocket. My son is 22 years old, and he would tell you unequivocally that he's never had more than $200 in his pocket. But going back to when I was young, I used to look forward to getting cash from my dad. That was his gift to me, cash. He didn't buy stuff. And I love that more than my Aunt Valerie's sweaters. I was like, give me cash. But nowadays, do we even think about it the same way? And I'll tell you a story that I think hopefully will resonate with you. I'm in Atlanta, so many of you will pick up 2 accents as I talk between New York and Atlanta. A number of years ago, Atlanta created this unbelievably fantastic stadium in the city to host a new soccer team and a new football team. And so I went to a soccer game. This is one of the inaugural games. And they had made this decision to go cashless. This was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. There was lots of discussion. There were articles. There were people on Twitter like, I can't believe I couldn't use my $10 at the soccer game. And it was like, I was like, why couldn't I do it? There was a lot of consternation, let's put it that way. Most recently, coming out of our current situation, the pandemic, I had a chance to go to a playoff basketball game. So I went to go see the Knicks versus the Hawks. So I had a chance to rib my son, which worked out poorly for me. And so we went to the game. And so we're at the game based on distancing and shields and all these things that existed. There was no way to accept cash there at all. And not one human being, and I was very aware of this, business owners, not one human being raised a fuss at all. No one ever thought about it. There was no thought. There were ATMs all along the arena, and not a human being was at the ATM. Not one person was getting cash at all. And I tell you this to tell you that you've probably seen technology in your business change the same way. You've probably seen it go very quickly as far as where you're getting your supplies from, your vendors, all of that, and how that is working. And so what I'll be talking to you about is similar to what Chris was sharing as we go through cash itself. So for me personally, I'm a little OCD. So there's a certain point where I didn't want to touch cash. This was before the pandemic happened. I didn't want to touch it because I was like, I read too many articles about what's on cash. And so I was like, if I can avoid touching cash, I can do this. And I'm in the payments world. And I know that there are lots of risks associated with handling cash. If you have a business that has cash, a lot of it sitting around. And so I said, all right, we're moving quickly. And so when you think about cash, Chris shared that a lot of it moved to terminals. Going back to the illustrations that he shared, a lot of them were those boxes. You still see those boxes somewhere where someone will used to swipe the card in, right? They'd swipe the card into the actual device. And so that was a really prevalent thing for a long period of time. And then many of you, some of you may be business owners, some of you are listening to us today or listening to us in the future that are restaurants. And you would see it as a setup like this, where you'd see computers that would process it because they wanted to track the inventory. They wanted to understand how many breadsticks were out, who sold what, who bought what, where, and they wanted to make sure that you knew it very, competently. And so this exists today too as well. And then in 2014, the president that we had made this decision that he was going to mandate all federal agencies, and this links back to what I do, that all federal agencies accepted what was called EMV cards. So now most of us don't even think twice about inserting our card into something. You just say, all right, that's it. Everyone's card has now that little computer chip on it. And just quite frankly, when you think about yourself as a business owner, you're really in business for three things. You're trying to get more money, you're trying not to spend more money, and you're trying to reduce your risk. And this EMV allowed for you to do that because your risk was that less because fraud happening in those chips were just less. And in this last illustration, the two devices that you see there are where you can wave your card or your phone at a device and it'll pick it up and do a transaction. And the reason why I say it's two devices is that your phone is a device itself that accepts payments. And this all links back to what Chris was sharing. And the reason why we wanted to share this with you all is that when you think about increasing your profits, and if you have a business that's growing, say you're small today, and you have this map, this operational map that you've done that says in 5 years, we're going to be here. In 10 years, we're going to be here. And we're going to need funding along the way. We're going to need all of these things along this way because we need to get one of those computers or we need to get one of those devices. All of these things, business owners, they all exist now at the same time. They all exist. So if you think about technology and how it's moved, technology moves in a lot of cases, but it stays there the same way. I'll make a really poor analogy. So for example, if I had an antenna TV, which was what I watched when I was a kid, I can still watch TV on an antenna, even if I can watch it now on a streaming device. It still exists. And the same thing exists when it comes to all of these methods. So think about, how do I grow my profits in a way where I'm taking advantage of, whether it's not today or whether it's 6 months from now or a year from now, how do I make sure that I have a terminal if I have a retail box? How do I make sure I'm following up with technology that exists, making sure that my people, my clients are inserting their card when it needs to be? And what happens when my client wants to tap it or wants to waive it? And the last point I'll share here is that we've got lots of generations. These 5 illustrations have generations attached to them. So my parents' generation don't know what that thing is at the bottom left-hand corner. They don't know what it is to tap or wave a card or a phone at a thing. They don't know it. They know what the middle image is, and to a less extent, they know what the upper left-hand image is, but they don't know most of the rest of it. But at the same time, my son doesn't know most of the things on that screen besides what you might see at the bottom part of the screen. All of these exist at the same time. So we'll talk to you about making sure that you think about, how do you make sure that your clients, which may be many different groups, that you're lining that up for them. And so the migration from cash to card payments is moving exponentially. It's moving really, really quick. And you've got to think about, how do you do that? And COVID accelerated those. I had a friend of mine who's not in our industry. I was talking to him about our industry, and he shared with me, once I was talking about it, he said, wow, I'm so glad that payments, electronic payments existed through COVID. Like, what would happen if there was no way of paying electronically throughout COVID, and everyone's at home, everyone's on Amazon, everyone's doing whatever? What happened then? How would that work then? Think about that, business owners. Think about your customers and how they're moving. And so this omni-commerce that you see here, this is like a payments term. This is like a payments nomenclature term. But I think you get the point that all of these boxes here, at some point, your business either has them today or they'll have them at some point. So if you got a website today, when do you do an e-commerce solution for that site? What do you sell today that you can sell on that? If you have a social network, even if you don't have a social network set up, social networks exist for your business. I don't go to a restaurant these days without looking at it and looking at one of those apps and saying, what's the rating of that restaurant? I just don't. Maybe I'm in one of those other generations. Maybe I'm a transplant somehow. Word of mouth exists. It still exists. If your business is local to where you are, and you have you're in a community that's close knit, you've got to keep your word of mouth going. You can't, if you get if somebody, Susie down the block, doesn't like what you're doing, and he or she tells 20 people, then your business suffers for that. And you think about brick and mortar, it's never going to go away. Just like that other slide where all of those things existed, it's going to exist today. And online marketplaces, like where can you have your wares that are out there? So when you hear the term omni-commerce, business owners, think about, how do I grow my business in a way that I'm taking advantage of all of these? That I'm really focusing on all of these and how each one of these work. That's a key thing for you to think about. How do I make sure that my plan at some point gets all of these? Because you deserve it, and you deserve to have your business in every single one of these boxes at some point in your path. So keep in mind that your clients are the people. Going back to my topic about my thought about the 5 generations, you don't want somebody coming into your store. This statement I'm going to say was something that people did a lot years ago, especially when I was moving from New York to Atlanta. I don't accept this, or I don't accept that. They're like, I don't want to take that. I don't want to take that. In business and consumers, we all wear sheep, like, well, what do you take? Then what do you take? And then we go digging into our pockets to find what the business owner would take, and then we give it to them because we want our stuff. In 2020, it doesn't work that way. If somebody comes into your store and you don't have the way that they want to pay, not the way you want to accept payment, there's a chance that you may never see them again. They might find a way to pay at that moment, but it sticks in their craw. They're not going to forget it. So make sure that your business methods, especially when it comes to payments, and other things that you do don't have any friction. You want when they come in their store and they say, do you have a red turtleneck sweater for winter? You say, yes, go look over there. As opposed to say, no, we don't have any of those. You want to make sure that you have what they want, what your clients want. So that is key takeaway number 2. And with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Chris to talk about our next steps here.
Winston, thanks for all that information. And there's probably a lot to digest there, but don't worry, we're going to break it down even further, give you some practical tips to walk away from today. But I want to take a step back. Just, Winston and I coming from the banking side, to give everyone a chance to think about how they should be looking at their bank partners. Most people, if they're asked, what do banks do? They really think of 3 topics. It's a place to borrow money, right? If it's a consumer, it might be for an auto loan or home refinance. Businesses, what Richard spoke about earlier, access to capital to expand the business and so forth. It's a place to keep money safe, right? Whether it's safety deposit boxes or savings accounts or checking accounts, CDs, or other instruments like that. A bank is a place to store money. And thirdly, people think of banks as a place to get those tools we're talking a lot about today, cards, to pay for things. Although there are some maybe large retailers that issue their own cards, generally cards that are out there in this payments ecosystem are issued through banks. But I would suggest that we should take a step back and think about banks more broadly. On the right side of this slide, this is just a partial inventory of things. For example, the bank Winston and I work for, Comerica, offer equipment leasing and lockbox and wires, ACH processing, currency exchange, commercial insurance products. Obviously, for aspiring business owners, maybe wealth management services or retirement planning someday. And that's only a fraction of the things we offer. Another way to illustrate it that's related to COVID is, Winston and I have counterparts that issue commercial or corporate cards to businesses that need to pay for things. Now, historically, those were used primarily for managing travel and entertainment expense. Businesses would give them to employees, or the business owner would use it himself or herself to pay for travel or entertain clients. But what we've seen gradually over time, and what was really accelerated during COVID, is businesses were asking for those cards so they could pay their vendors and suppliers. Because we had situations where a business might not even be able to get into their facility and access checks, right? Because lockdowns were so strict in some regions and markets. So cards became a way for businesses to pay each other. And again, that's just an example of how payments is moving to a digital world. But the other side of that is that banks have a collection of subject matter experts in a wide variety of areas. Like Winston and I have been in merchant services for decades. Comerica and other banks are going to have subject matter experts in any number of areas, like that commercial card example. And so if you want to advance the slide, Winston, I think the key takeaway here is that banks can play a much larger role as you think about growing your business. Don't be afraid to take advantage of subject matter experts that specialize in different products or services that might be able to benefit your company in some way, right? There may be some objective or goal you have for your business that requires very specific functionality or a very specific service. And banks effectively have it's almost free consultative services for you. So we would encourage all of you to think about the banks you work with that way. Again, but we'll focus it back on merchant services now with, I think, some very actionable items here that you're going to be able to take away with you. So on the next slide, we're going to have an action plan. because I know sometimes the information shared in an environment like this can be overwhelming. So we're going to give you two very specific things to take with you that you can implement with your business today. Very practical actions. So I'll share the first one, and then Winston will share the second one and offer some concluding remarks before we open up to questions. So the first item, take an inventory of all the ways your company gets paid. And I don't want this to be, a short exercise. I want it to be in depth. Understand where you're accepting cash, where you're accepting cards. Are you accepting checks? Are you accepting wires or ACH? Are you using lockbox? Understand all your receivables channels. And then you want to break it down even further. Who is paying you, right? Are you getting paid by businesses on these channels and consumers on these? Or your customers here, but other businesses are paying you this way. Whatever it might be, is understanding the who. So understand the channel, then the who. Then understand the timing, right? So in credit card, for example, it's common to accept the payment today and have the funds available to you by the next morning. Very rough timing. Cash, if you accept the payment today, it is in your hand now, right? So that's timing, but make sure you really understand it end to end. Are you accepting payment before you provide the service, or are you doing it after you've provided the service? How far after? Those sorts of things are always important. Just stay on top of these because it'll help you manage your business better. Then the last part of this, understanding the channels and the types of payments, is the expense management. I think often we talk about the cost of accepting cards, and that can be scary for a small business. I understand. Winston and I could probably give hour-long presentations on why the costs are what they are. Frankly, they are designed to create a balanced ecosystem that represents the interests of all stakeholders, right? The card networks that are providing a security and reliability, the banks that are issuing credit to the cardholders that are making purchases, and then the businesses that are benefiting from those sales. And so the interests of all of those have to be represented, and that's how you get to the costs. Now, if you're looking for an answer of it should only cost me X%, you won't get that today. Every business is different. A small sandwich shop that is accepting $10 transactions, mostly on consumer debit cards, might pay a much smaller rate than a company that is selling online only to corporations that are paying with corporate cards. And that is because each card and each type of processing method has a different cost associated with it. So it's very complicated behind the scenes, but we're going to simplify it for you. The key is to understand the effective rate for your business on accepting that transaction. So what do I mean by that? You take the total cost that you pay your service provider and you divide it by the total dollar amount of card sales. So if you paid $200 in fees to your card service provider on $10,000 in card sales, 200 divided by 10,000, 0.02 or 2%. Your effective rate is 2%. So ignore the noise about an advertised rate, ignore all the other fees, understand everything together and get an effective rate. As a business owner, that is what you want to manage to. You want to make sure that that doesn't go up, and you want to see if you can drive it down. That effective rate will vary depending on the type of business you have. And that's why it's not beneficial to just say, oh, your rate should be this. So understand your effective rate, calculate it every single month and track it. And don't be afraid to ask your service provider, hey, how can I lower this even further? That is the key. And understanding those costs will help you, further along in terms of, managing how you price services and products and so on. Last thing I'm going to give here before I pass on to Winston. Understand that there's hidden costs with different payment channels. So a little secret, cash has a cost, for example, of counting it. Cash has a cost of driving it to the bank. And unfortunately, cash has a habit of disappearing, whether it is slightly dishonest employees or something else. And so you have to understand that when you go through this exercise, really try to figure out the true costs, right? How much involvement it takes you to manage that payment channel and so forth. So that is action plan step number one. We want you to have something valuable to take back with you. I'm going to pass to Winston now for another recommendation, an action item, and then he'll offer some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Chris. I would surmise that each one of you think about your customers and your clients daily, that they are on your mind all of the time. And so when you think about understanding their payment opportunities and channels, that's something you should incorporate into that if you haven't already. It's understanding what it is that they like to pay with. Do they want to pay with you with a peer-to-peer app, as an example? Or do they want to pay for goods and services from you with a traditional machine? Or do they like to use a debit card or their rewards card? Surveying your clients is unbelievably important. The old days of the TV shows where there's some advertising guys there saying, we'll sell this to 1 million people. Doesn't make sense anymore. Your customers are your customers. There are 7 some billion people on the planet, and there's enough customers for you. There's enough. But just understanding who they are is the key thing. And understanding their choice of payment is one piece of that profile. I've seen a lot in a lot of presentations over the last few years, this concept of creating like a persona for your customer. Like, what does your customer look like? What is he or she, what do they buy? Where do they go? What do they do? And you got to think about that in a very surgical way. So when they go online, and you can get this data from your payments provider to understand, well, what are they doing? And how is that working? When they come into your store, what is their preference? Are they saying something to you physically, verbally, or are they making grimaces when they have to pay one way or the other? Really having a sense as to what that looks like is really key. It is key as anything else, because they will make sure that your business thrives. You know, a lot of you probably had to survive over the last period of time. But now it's 2021 and it's the time to thrive. It's the time to say, you know what, I've got through this. I'm here now and I got to maximize my profits today. And so these guys gave me some nuggets. I heard a lot of what they said, and I want to take one or two things. I want to take the action plan that Chris shared, and the surveying of your customers and clients is the key component of that. You got to really do those two things. And obviously we're here to help you. We've got an unbelievable amount of experience between us and our team. Our team is really well versed in how to do this. But start today. Do it in little bits and pieces. I always talk about books a lot. And I've been trying to avoid talking to you all today about books, because I just read a lot of books. But one of the books that I think it really brings us home for me is this book called Atomic Habits by this gentleman called James Clear. And it's about taking things that you want to do that are big, ambitious, massive goals, and breaking them down into little atomic bite sizes. So atoms, not explosions. So atoms, like understanding, how do you take them into little bits and pieces? And so the customer you see today, or the customer you hear today, start surveying them now. And today, we're so thankful to spend time with you. And we shared with you that there's a migration that's going apace significantly from cash to other payment methods. People in your wallet right now, you've got at least 2 to 3 ways of paying something. So it exists right now in your wallet, and it does in your customers as well. And that migration will not change. People are not going to go back to 1965 when it comes to paying for stuff. They're going to go to the way that they want to, which was the key takeaway number 2. They come into your store, they go online, and they have the power. And like, they don't want any friction. They want to make sure that they're doing what they want to do. And then understanding that you've got to make a real strong plan as to how do you put all of the things that we do beyond just merchant services, and how we can help you with that as a business is a key thing to understand. That we are here to serve you and we're here to help you. So Richard and David and Chris, I thank you all, business owners. We hope for you to have a fantastic roaring 2020s. We know it's going to be that way for you. I thank you guys so much. And I think we're going to migrate to the questions portion. And I'll turn it over to David for any other things you would like to share as far as we go on to that next piece.
No, I mean, Chris and Winston, thank you both so much. I think that was a lot of really great information. And, you know, like you said, this is a lot of stuff to digest here. So you got to take it piece by piece, the little nuggets, and it'll all come together eventually. We do have a few questions in the chat I'm looking at right now. Let's see here. So one of them says is, if we adapt to digital payments, how can we ensure our data is secure? You know,
Well,
data privacy has been a big issue over COVID.
yes. And that's a great question. And here in California, of course, recently there was a Consumer Protection Act related to data privacy that was passed and went into effect. The best way to ensure safety of data is really to follow the guidance from the PCI Security Standards Council. That's PCI DSS, stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. The council was created by all the card networks and brands together to create a uniform set of rules and a framework for establishing security. And if you're following those guidelines and you're validating compliance annually, you will be doing everything necessary to meet the privacy requirements and the data security. Generally, I put the requirements into two buckets. One side is the technology side. Most service providers are not going to be providing something to you that is not reliable and has not been validated as secure. So from a technology standpoint, you're likely going to be fine. But if you create something yourself, that's a different story. You need to make sure it is validated compliant. There are a lot of aspiring programmers that like to create their own tools, and that's doable. And in the early days, for example, of the internet, we saw a lot of that. But if you're using a reputable product, that's going to satisfy it from the data, the technology side. The other side is looking at your internal operations, right? It's who has access to card numbers. Are you doing the right things, such as if an employee leaves, are you making sure that their access to systems is disabled? Those are basic processes that as a business owner, you have to make sure are in place. But again, if you follow the guidance from the PCI Security Council, they're basically, they call them self-assessment questionnaires. If you're able to answer all of those questions affirmatively, you will be in great shape.
I will pick up on one thing that you said around the business aspect of it. Just on a personal level, and this is not necessarily just related to payments, just you as a business owner generally, just make sure that you're storing your data in secure ways. Like who has what contact information for your clients, to Chris's point. Are you using a VPN at your location? You know, especially if you have a Wi-Fi access for your customers and your clients. Do you have your own kind of secure password and VPN for all of that data? As we've seen, that's not going anywhere. There's going to be attempts all over the place. And you want to make sure that you have the card security, the PCI DSS security, as well as your own personal data, because we know that there's a potential for us as a litigious society to get involved in any way as we can. So make sure that you got your stuff as secure as possible. You personally, as a business owner, that you've got your card secure and that you and your employees are all secure at the same time.
Great, thank you for that. The next question I think goes back to your example, Winston, about the stadium that was no longer accepting cash. So at what rate are large businesses moving to a cashless process? Locally, I've seen more businesses going this way.
Fast. I probably don't have statistics in front of me, but there's a couple things driving it. And COVID, as Winston alluded to earlier, COVID is really accelerating that. I know he shared a couple of anecdotes, one that I can share right here. Just going to youth soccer games when they restarted here in Southern California just a couple of months ago, a place that I am always driving to. The parking lot does not accept cash anymore. That shifted from pre-COVID. They made the choice after COVID for the safety of our employees. We're not accepting cash. Now, I think it can be debatable whether handling cash is a health risk or not, but there's a perception of it. And I think it's driving that. There's a lot of things happening though that are contributing to this acceleration. Part of it is consumer behaviors, which we talked about very early in this, and Winston talked about as well. You know, from a generation standpoint, younger generations just are not used to ever using cash, so they're moving that way. Is those younger generations move into leadership roles in businesses, they're going to dictate that their businesses do things this way, right? That's what happens. Another thing that is happening is that moving to digital payments is a way, frankly, for governments to be more efficient in tax collection and put a stranglehold, frankly, around, you know, illicit market activities, right? So you have a government enforcement part of it, you have a consumer behavior portion of it, and you have a health portion of it. So those are three macro trends that are driving this. Again, I can't I can't tell you the exact rate, except Winston and I will see industry metrics all the time that suggest it is going faster and faster. Typically what will drive it, from what I see just in Comerica's business, it takes a single customer to say, I want to pay you this way. And the business says, okay, I now, if I was more of a B2B, business to business type of company, it's realizing, okay, that this is what's happening now. I have to do it. And so they do it to accommodate one customer. Or a business says, I only want to take payment that way. And so the business says, oh, well, I guess I have to pay this way. So it takes that single instance, and then the convenience of it causes them to move more and more of their payments into that channel.
Yeah, I would just say that all of those things, on top of all those things, I think when you get down to the very locales across in the states, across the United States, I think you'll see different things as you travel across the United States. Yeah, there'll be some parts of the country that are totally in or already moved digitally, like the stadium that I referenced here in Atlanta. But if you went maybe 100 miles from that stadium, it's probably a different story. They're probably still migrating that and trying to figure out how they should or could or would do such a thing. And I think that that's an important point to think about. And it's not going anywhere. Like I said before, we're getting to the point where people are paying for money, using money that are based on other money. So that people are buying money with actual money, they're buying other money. And so the movement to digital payment mechanisms aren't going anywhere. And all the points that Chris mentioned as far as the regulatory things, I think those are benefits to businesses as well. That allows them to really quantify what they've got going on. You understand analytically what is happening. Where is my shrinkage? And that's a term we use when money is disappearing. And so where is it disappearing to? It doesn't disappear when you do digital transactions. You know exactly what it is. You will never say to yourself, well, I know it was $30. Well, what happened to the $30? You will never have that concern. You know exactly what that payment was. Whereas if it's $30 and it was cash, we all, depending on where you are, what part of the country, you could say what might happen. You know, well, that haircut was $25, but I only saw $20. What happened to the other $5? I don't know. So I'm giving you a little bit of a background of where I've come from, but that's what could happen. But when it's all done with a payment, a digital payment mechanism, you know exactly what happened.
Great, and personal experience too. I did go to a Dodger game and there was no cash accepted. So it is an ongoing trend to answer that question.
Yes.
All right, last question, then I'll pass it back over to Richard to close us out. So in omni-commerce, you talked about, websites, social media, mobile. So where should you start with that omni-commerce strategy?
I will start by saying, make a plan. And so see where you are as a business. So if today, for example, say you're that one slide, and I'll see if I can share it here, go again. Say you're that one business that has the brick and mortar. And you're saying to yourself, I want an e-commerce site. So thinking about what that strategy will look like. What do you want to build out there specifically? And my personal view and my history tells me that start with the web first if you're a brick and mortar store. If you are a website, then think about what's your social presence look like. So if everything's online, then what's your social presence look like? Because that's a driver for you. That's a big time driver, because people are going to your website based on what's happening, based on the engagement you're having with your people on the various social networks. If you're word of mouth, then you probably have to, and you're only word of mouth, and you want to move into these other areas, then I would say, think about how does that plan, what's the next step in that plan? And I would say, starting with the website first, if you're in a retail location or retail environment, start there. If you're in a website or an e-commerce online place, make sure that your online presence has no gaps. So if you've got some review somewhere, clean it up. Respond to it and say, this is how we clean up Susie's situation. Because if you do it that way, then it can respond positively to your future clients. So that's my view. I know it's very specific, but I think about this a lot. So
yeah, I think David and to whomever asked the question, that's a great question. It is hard to answer because it is a little bit different for every single type of company. Yeah. But I think Winston's advice is spot on. I think there are other resources you can grab, such as industry trade shows or talking to bank partners, right? Subject matter experts. What do they see other similar businesses to your type doing, right? The other thing is going back to the action items. The second one was surveying your customers. I'm sure every one of us on this meeting has answered that survey. How did you hear about us? Right? Businesses want to know that. There's a reason. And so surveying your customers and understanding where they're hearing about you, what their preferences are, and you can tailor that to get the information you need to figure out what that strategy should be. So the survey is part of the action plan. And then I would suggest trade shows that are in the industry that you're in, as well as subject matter experts at your bank partners. Those are a few different avenues to take.
Great. Well, thank you both, Chris and Winston, again. A lot of great information here. I know Richard said in the beginning too, this is being recorded. It's going to be posted on social media. So if you need to go back and rewatch it, you have that capability to do that. I know also, AMPAC, aside from the capital, provides their one-on-one advising. So if you need some assistance, go reach out to them. Of course, reach out to your bank. If you bank with us, even better. But, reach out to your bank and, talk to them about how you can implement these strategies. And Richard, is there anything else you'd like to add? Close us out.
What I will add in closing out is, of course, thank everyone for attending the meeting on today. And gentlemen, the presentation was absolutely outstanding. I think the awareness has been raised for all those that have listened. And it sounds to me, if I didn't know anything about Comerica Bank, that you're a very, very customer-friendly bank that I should probably stop by as a business owner at my local Comerica Bank and say, you know what? I learned about merchant processing. I'm really confused. This is my business. Help. Is that a fair assessment that we could do that? We can stop by the bank and get that help?
I think any one of our banking centers, they would be completely open to someone coming in and asking that sort of question.
Well, I'd like to encourage all of our business owners to do exactly that. You've learned a lot of information today. I know you're thinking I'm overwhelmed. Just go by the bank and have somebody give you a hand. Thank you so very much, gentlemen. And again, to everyone that attended on today, this meeting has been recorded. You'll be able to find it again on the YouTube channel of ours. And I'm sure Comerica Bank has a way and also to place it on YouTube. We'd love to see you again. Our next session, which is next week, we're going to be talking more about accessing capital. Look forward to seeing you then. God bless everyone. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye now.